Good morning, everyone. So let us start our the webinar. And good morning to everyone. Professor K.R.S. Sambasiva Rao, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Mizoram University. The speaker, Dr. Prashant Kumar Srivastava, Faculty of IIT Patna. Dr. Shanta Laishram, Faculty, ISI Delhi, and participants. We are delighted and honored to host the seminar on mathematical modeling of infectious disease, its relevance in time of COVID, and binary recurrence sequence and its arithmetics, organized as a part of series of webinars by Mizoram University during this lockdown period. The first lecture of this webinar will be taught by Prashant Kumar Srivastava and followed by Shanta Laishram. Let me introduce Dr. Prashant Kumar Srivastava, the first speaker. He did his BSc and MSc from CSJM University, Kanpur. He completed Ph.D. degree from IIT Patna on mathematical modeling of ICID dynamics in vivo. His research interests include mathematical modeling, nonlinear dynamics, time delay models, optimal control, modeling infectious disease dynamics, mathematical models in management, behavioral dynamics, mathematical models in immunology and related areas. He was selected for D.S. Kothari postdoctoral fellowship and was postdoctoral fellow at IIT Kanpur. He was awarded the Best Research Award by IIT Patna and SBI on 2013 and IIT Kanpur 2007. He was selected for the Best Paper Award in Biomathematics at 74th Indian Mathematical Society Conference 2008. He is an elected member of National Academy of Science, Allahabad. He has delivered more than 35 talks and keynote addresses in various national and international fora. He has visited many countries like Italy, China, Russia, etc. He has published many publications in International Journal of Repute. Once again, thanks to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Mizoram University, Professor K.R.S. Sambasiva Rao, for allowing us to arrange this webinar. I wish a very fruitful and productive meeting. Thank you all. So, Prashantji, you can start your presentations.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Sarat, for introducing me. First of all, I must place my thanks in order to Professor K.R.S. Sambasiva Rao, Honorable Vice Chancellor of Mizoram University, for his thought and idea of having webinar. I am told that this webinar is going for a very long time, and there are other webinars which are in queue. So this is a very good academic activity to keep people engaged during the time of COVID and these stressful times. Thanks to Dr. Sarat and his team for the invite and following up with me regarding this particular webinar. And these are other acknowledgements which are which are due to my collaborators for a part of small work which I will use in these slides. So the organization of this talk is actually in following parts. Initially, I will provide with the introduction and motivation about what we are doing, though I think we all have read in the newspaper and we are all aware about the importance of mathematical modeling, but there is little bit of motivation to the work. Then we'll talk about the basic model framework, certain threshold quantity, which is very important in modeling. Then we'll further discuss about a couple of models where we will discuss some control interventions and then their utilization. So, of course, given the 1 hour time, all these things will not be possible to cover in detail, but we will try to cover them as much as possible. And then finally, we'll have the conclusion and references. So essentially, this is first 40 minutes of the talk, and then next 10 minutes, I will talk about certain models which are related with COVID. So mathematical modeling in real world problem, its importance is essentially undisputed, and essentially it has emerged as a very important tool in almost all areas of engineering, applied sciences, social sciences, economy, management. You name the area and you will find the application of the mathematical modeling because of certain advantages which it have, and those advantages are that the alternative mechanism can be explored through modeling in order to understand a particular system. The models which we develop, these can be further assessed without resorting to costly or ethically impossible experiments. For example, in case of disease management, you don't need to perform experiment on the individual, but you can actually provide a mathematical model which can be experimented with the set of parameters. You keep on changing them, and then you can see how the results are changing. Similarly, let us say, take the example of atomic explosion. If you want to see how much energy is released during an atomic explosion, we don't need to do the explosion every now and then. Rather, we do them once and then we collect the data and then we analyze the data using some mathematical models. So the experiment performance is not always possible, and it is also not ethically correct in certain cases, and therefore we perform essentially virtual experiment with the mathematical models. These models which we propose, usually they can be used for the quantitative prediction as well as qualitative insight. So there are two aspects when we talk about a mathematical model. Whether we want to look for the quantitative predictions, that means in terms of precise numbers, or we want to know the qualitative insight, or we want to have features of the system. So that depending on our need, we will be actually utilizing a particular model. Today we will be talking about the theoretical models. They have their own advantages over the empirical models, which I would like to emphasize, because in science we not only need to understand the patterns, but we also need to answer why those patterns arise. That means we are more into causation than correlation, and therefore theoretical model provide very good base to answer these aspects, answer these questions. So what is the process of mathematical modeling? It's very important. This particular slide is very important. I'm sorry, this particular slide is very important. And towards the end, we will try to understand that why this is so important to understand. So given a real world problem, what we do is that we always have basic goal whenever we are given a problem. And that basic goal is associated with a basic question which we need to answer. So depending on the basic goal and the question, we approximate the system, the real world problem, into a real world model. Further, we convert this real world model into a mathematical model using the symbols and abstractions and mathematical rules and formulas. Then we go with the analysis, because now we have a mathematical model, so we know how mathematically we can analyze it. So we go with the mathematical analysis, find out conclusions, and these conclusions are further compared with the real world problem. So the process of mathematical modeling is very simple. You are given a real world problem. You convert it into a real world model. What do we mean by converting into a real world model is that we shut off unnecessary information from the real world system, and we only keep those information which are actually important for us, keeping the goal or the question which we want to address in mind. When we progress with the seminar, we will see that how this particular modeling process is very important for us. Because if we change the question, if we change the goal, the whole model or the whole modeling process, that may change. So simply we convert a real world problem into a mathematical model, draw the conclusion, compare. This is basically called validation. And if it is validated, if it is close to the reality, or if it is answering the question which we have posed, good enough. Otherwise, we make changes in these steps and then we keep on doing the process. So it's mathematical modeling essentially is an ongoing process. It's not a one-time measure that you will get a model just by doing one-time exercise. What about infectious diseases? We all, I think, are aware about the diseases. They are caused by pathogenic microorganisms such as bacteria, viruses, parasites, fungi. Viruses cause diseases like HIV, influenza, SARS, and recently we have COVID-19. Bacteria cause the diseases like tuberculosis, anthrax, salmonella, and so on and so forth. Protozoas called malaria and sleeping sickness. So these are the diseases, some of the diseases which are mentioned here and which are caused by certain microorganisms. Depending on that, what is the cause of the disease and how it spreads, the fatality and the severity of the disease is actually assessed. Essentially, a disease can spread directly or indirectly from one person to another by respiratory droplets, for example, measles or even COVID-19, via body secretions, chlamydia, being by CC flies. This is your sleeping sickness, mosquitoes, you all know, malaria, and other waterborne diseases such as cholera. So not only what is important about knowing about the disease, but it is also important to know what is the mode of transmission, how it transmits, how it can spread, because then only we can propose the control intervention. So an in-depth understanding of the pathogen which causes the disease and the epidemiology of the disease helps in control or eradicate it. Diseases have impacts. Major impact is on mortality and morbidity because it leads to mortality and morbidity. Infectious diseases, in fact, contribute to total of the 1/6 of deaths worldwide at present. Diseases have socioeconomic consequences. I think this is the time when one cannot emphasize more than what all socioeconomic consequences these diseases may have. These are related with the healthcare. These are related with the travel, the restricted travel. You can't travel for any except for any important reason. You cannot travel. Lockdowns happened, and all those kind of things happen. The people have lost the job, so employment is affected. All kind of impact on the economy. So there are impacts of the diseases which are classified as socioeconomic impacts. Control interventions, which I will talk in the next slide. If available, they do improve quality life of the individuals, but they pose significant economic burden. And therefore, diseases have major impact because of the socioeconomic consequences, because of the economic burden. If control interventions are being imposed, because of mortality and morbidity, they have major impact on public budget and policy of the government. So what are the control interventions? An intervention, pharmaceutical or non-pharmaceutical, that may be applied to control the spread of the disease. Here, few of them are listed. For example, treatment. The treatment may be available to all, but mostly it is limited. We don't have the treatment to all the individuals who might get sick. So we have a limited treatment, the vaccination, there is possible intervention of the vaccination. Another intervention is called screening. We screen the people and check whether they have infection or they don't have infection. And if they do have infection, then we provide them either treatment or we put them in a different kind of controls. Say, for example, isolation or quarantine or social distancing. These are another kind of control interventions. These are classified as non-pharmaceutical interventions. Isolation, you keep an infected individual in the isolation so that he or she doesn't infect others. Quarantine, you keep people in the quarantine so that they are safe, or if they are infected, they are not infecting others. Social distancing in order to avoid the infections. There is another important aspect is awareness of the information-induced behavioral change. Recently, this has taken some of the interesting. This has taken some of the interest of the researchers that if you know about the disease spread, your behavioral response changes, and once your behavioral response changes, you start taking protective measures, and therefore you are less vulnerable than the others. And therefore, this can also be used as another control intervention. We'll talk a bit more probably once we move ahead in the presentation. What are the major challenges during modeling? The determination and implementation of suitable control policies, like which control should be used and when it should be applied. That is a very challenging task. Also, choosing the suitable control intervention within control interventions such as preventive control intervention, or the control intervention such as treatment control intervention. What is preventive control intervention? It is the intervention which is applied before the individual becomes infected. So you prevent the individuals to become infected, healthy individuals to become infected. And in case of treatment, you provide treatment to the infected individuals so that they don't spread the infection to the others and they become healthy again. So this is actually a challenging task during an outbreak, whether you should use the preventive measure or you should use the treatment measure. Here I would like to spend a couple of minutes on this particular point, because what happens if you are using the preventive measure, then your number of infected in future, they will be lesser, and therefore there will be a reduction of pressure on the other control intervention, which is treatment. That means if as I mentioned, that your capacity for the treatment is limited, so you don't want many people to have infection. And if you are providing treatment, let us say at the very beginning, you are providing treatment to the individual, then this in turn will reduce the number of infective, and therefore you will have lesser number of people to put for the preventive measures, and therefore the pressure on the preventive measures will be reduced. So one measure has the impact on the other measure, and therefore it's really a very challenging task to choose which one should be applied and in what capacity, which preventive, which control measure should be applied, because one control measure has the impact on the other control measure. Definitely, there is a trade-off among the available control interventions for their implementation during the epidemic outbreak, because they have their pros and cons. Another challenging aspect is validation of the theoretical models, or the models which you propose with the data or the pattern. And further, another challenge is to have the combination of the control policy, of suitable control policies, which not only minimize the disease burden, but also the economic burden, because you cannot spend, your resources are limited, so you cannot spend your money on control measures just like that. So you have to choose between the, or rather you have to choose that which of the control measure should be applied, and in what rate or in what quantity they should be applied, so that your economic burden is also minimized and your disease burden, which is the number of infective, that is also minimized. So it's basically optimization problem, which later it turns out to be, it becomes an optimization problem. What are the important motivation for this work? maybe I have mentioned most of the things here, so I will move ahead with this. This is about the behavioral response. This is about the information and treatment. This is about the associate cost. So objective of this talk is to develop certain models which will be accounting for these behavioral response and treatment, and to also think about a suitable combination of the control policies which minimizes the economic burden as well as disease burden, and how will we minimize that particular cost. So for that we should have a predefined cost. Now this predefined cost actually depends, so depending on that particular predefined cost, we will be talking about the minimization, so that will be converting to an optimization problem. So before we move ahead, we have to understand what is the basic model framework. So for modeling diseases, we usually use the so-called compartmental model. For this, we divide the whole population into certain imaginary partitions, which are known as compartments, and we identify individuals in those compartments, and then we see how the movement of those individuals from one compartment to the other compartment is happening. So depending upon the level of the pathogen, this actually depends, these partitions depend on the level of the pathogen. The total population, which is referred here as N, is in general classified in following. These partition will depend that how many partitions you want to make. So for example, I have taken here the whole population to be divided in the following parts. One is the susceptible individuals, the population which is healthy at the moment and prone to the infection. Other one is the latent population, which is also known as infected or the exposed population, and it is represented as E. Then that is infective or the infectious population, the population which can infect. It has pathogen and it has the capacity to infect other. And exposed population is assumed here that this is not infectious. So they have the infection, but they are not infectious to the others. Then removed are the recovered population, and this is represented by R. These are the individuals who had infection in past, but they have been either treated or with natural recovery they have been recovered. So the total population in this case becomes sum of these partitions, sum of this population in these partitions, that is S plus E plus I plus R. Depending on the definition, one may have further partitions. It must be very clear from the very beginning of the modeling that how many partitions one wants to make. In the next couple of slides, we will talking about different kind of models where we will be taking few of these partitions. That means we will be dividing the whole population. Maybe we will be excluding the exposed population or removed population. So this also depends on the disease, particular disease which you are studying, because depending on the disease, these partitions will change. So let us start with the simple process of, in general, the simple process, as I have already defined about this population. The simple process is from susceptible, an individual is moved to the exposed class, then from exposed it moves to the infected class, and then from infected it moves to the recovered class. So this is generally the process of flow of the infection. And if we are having lesser number of partitions, say for example, if we do not consider the exposed class, then the individual from the susceptible class will move to the infected class, and from infected class it will move to the recovered class. So depending on what kind of partitions you are considering, there are different kind of models. We name them with the abbreviation. And in the next slide, I will be discussing about model which is known as SI model. So this is susceptible infective model. Here we have assumed that the disease is such that susceptible individuals get infection and they become infective, and it means there is no latency involved here. Individual becomes infective immediately, and these infective individuals remain infective forever. So they do not get cured. This is very simplest assumption, and this is as I mentioned that the goal of study or the question of study governs that what your model will be. So here our top our target may be considered that we want to understand that how the number of infective will change in the population as time progresses. So that can be a question which we probably want to address. So let beta, this should be understood. Let beta be the average number of contacts that a susceptible individual makes with an infective individual on the average. So those are the number of contacts on the average between the susceptible and infective individuals. And those are adequate contacts such that these contacts are such that these contacts lead to the infection. And these average numbers of contacts are per unit time, per unit susceptible, per unit infective. So this is not a very difficult to understand. You can have the total number of contacts, and out of those total number of contacts, suppose somehow you are able to know that after how many contacts individuals have got infected. So you count them, and then you divide it by total number of susceptible, and they divide it by total number of infective, and divide it by the total number of time which has passed. Let us say that you count the contacts for 1 month, and then you figure out how many infectives have been produced in that 1 month period. Then you can have this number beta by divided by 1 month. So beta essentially sometimes is also called the infection rate, and this is related with, because this is per unit time, so this is related with the rate. So if I multiply it, let us say my modeling time period is delta t, and I want to know that how many susceptible individuals or how many infected individuals are there in the population after time delta t. So S at time t plus delta t will be S at time t, that is previous time t, susceptibles at time t, minus those individuals who got infection during this delta t time period. So in unit time period, we have beta contacts which are giving rise to new infections. So in delta t time period, this will be beta delta t, but this is per unit infective and per unit susceptible. Therefore, we must multiply it by the total number of susceptible and total number of infective, so that we will get that in that delta t time period, how many new infections have generated. So as many as new infections have generated, they will be taken out of the susceptible class and they will move to the infected class. That is why there is a negative sign here and there is a positive sign here. So infective at time t plus delta t will be infective at time t, and in addition there will be infective population which are added because of the infections which have occurred during this delta t time period. With these two equations, we can simply convert them into the differential equation by using the limits, bringing this st to the left hand side and delta t dividing both sides, and then you can write these simple equations. So the equation turns out to be ds over dt is equals to minus of beta si, and di over dt is equals to beta si. If you look at the way we have written the equation, we have not considered anything else other than the infection which is going on in the population. And if I sum the left hand side and the right hand side, I figure out that the sum of the left hand side is 0, which means that the rate of change of the total, that is s plus I, is 0. So as I mentioned that here we have considered just 2 compartments of the total population. That means my S plus I is the total population n, and therefore the rate of change of total population is 0, which means that I am considering the total population is actually constant. So assuming that the total population is constant, which is n0, the second equation here can be written in the following form. And why should you write it in this form? Because you can understand that there is no point of writing these two equations, because sum of s and I is constant. Therefore, if you know I, you can know s by subtracting s from n0, which you are calling as constant number n0. So replace that s here by n0 minus I. You will get the second equation as di over dt is equals to beta and not minus I into I. So the model actually converts into this form. Why do we want to do it in this form? Because we want to analyze, or we want to understand that what my mathematical model is giving, what information I am able to extract from my mathematical model. So this is you can easily see that this is a simple equation which can be solved by simply converting into a linear differential equation, and one can figure out what will be the solution of this equation. And once you know the solution and you are given the parameter beta, and the total population, you can actually figure out the solution curve. So you can get the patterns. That is not the point of discussion here. The point of discussion here is that how a simple assumption can lead to a simple model, which can give you the information about the question which you have raised, that what will be the infective count, how many infectives will be there. So that can be found from here simply. So that is the simple way to deal with it. Now suppose that we modify this model to another class of model, which is known as SIS model. What does it mean, SIS model? SIS means you are moving from susceptible to infective, and then after recovery you again move from infective to susceptible. That means that this model is useful for the diseases which provide you recovery. Just you can take the example of very simple example of common cold, which can correlate with everyone. So we get infection, and then after certain time period, even we take medication or we don't take medication, we get recovered out of the infection, and then we are prone to the infection again. That means we are moving from the susceptible class to the infective class. Then we get the infection, and once we recover, we move back again from infective class to the susceptible class. Now assume that this recovery period is 1 by gamma. If the recovery period is 1 by gamma, that means the rate of recovery is actually gamma. So basically this gamma is nothing but the fraction of individuals who are getting recovered. So this case, in this particular case, the rate of change of I, the I equation can be written. These two terms are similar to our first equation, or the first model, SI model, except that there is a change. Some individuals are leaving. So they are leaving at a rate gamma IT. So gamma IT essentially you can consider it as a fraction of infective population, which is being recovered. So where it will go after being recovered, it will be added into the susceptible. So this is essentially rate. DI over DT is equals to gamma IT. So this is the rate of change of I. This can be again understood very simply that what this parameter gamma means. So out of IT individuals, gamma IT are getting recovered. That means in unit time, of course. So in unit time, out of IT individuals, gamma IT individuals are getting recovered in unit time. That means out of one individuals, the gamma individual is getting recovered in unit time. That means out of one individual, one individual is getting recovered in 1 by gamma unit time. So simple unitary law will tell you that out of one individual is getting recovered. That means the individual himself is getting recovered 1 by gamma unit time. That means before recovering himself, he has spent 1 by gamma unit time in the infective class. So that's how this is related. 1 by gamma is related as the recovery period, and it's actually reciprocal to the recovery rate. Gamma is the recovery rate. What also can be actually, again, you can take up the information from here. What can be actually extracted from here is that the sum of these two equations, sum of these two equations is still 0. That means we are still assuming the population is constant. And if we take the second equation again, you can easily see that the second equation can be again further analyzed, and this di over dt is nothing but beta s minus gamma times I, and therefore di over dt will be positive or negative. Note it here, please. So di over dt will be positive or negative depending on this factor beta s minus gamma is positive or negative, which means that beta s by gamma is actually larger than 1 or smaller than 1. So at the very beginning, when the infection starts, the outbreak starts, then you know the total population is constant, and that is actually N0. So at the beginning, if I consider that population number as N0, then this number actually turns out to be beta N0 upon gamma. So this beta N0 upon gamma, this decides whether the count of infective will grow. Oh, I'm sorry, here there should be negative, this di over dt negative. The count of infective will grow or decay. That means the infection will grow or infection will decay or die out. If this number beta n naught over gamma is larger than 1 or smaller than 1. And this actually this number provides a very important information, and this very important number in epidemiology, and this is known as basic reproduction number. This tells you whether the disease will grow or disease will die out. So di over dt positive means the disease will grow if the number is larger than 1, and di over dt negative means the disease will essentially the numbers will die out if this number is less than 1. So if basic reproduction number is less than 1, then the disease will die out, and if basic reproduction number is larger than 1, then disease will persist or it will actually grow in the population. So we have got information out of this very simple model, and we have also got a very important threshold parameter or threshold value which will govern the eradication or which will govern the control of disease. What is the meaning here of this basic reproduction number? The meaning here is that these are secondary, the number of secondary cases produced by one infected individual when that infected individual is introduced in a completely susceptible population. So if you introduce one infected individual in completely susceptible population, then how many secondary infections are generated by that particular individual? That is the count of basic reproduction number. And the way we have defined our parameters beta and gamma, this interpretation helps here. So you can see that beta n0 by gamma can be written as beta n0 multiplied by 1 by gamma. So what is beta n0? Beta n0, beta is actually the number of contacts per unit time, per unit susceptible, per unit infective. So one infective with n0 susceptible and beta contacts. So it means that one infective makes beta n0 contacts in unit time. Those contacts which are adequate for infection, that means those contacts which actually develop the infection. So beta n0 is the total number of infective contacts in unit time. And what is 1 by gamma? 1 by gamma is the recovery period. That is the time period which that infective has spent in the infected class. That means infective was infectious. So during the infectious time period, the total number of contacts which an infective has made, this is beta n naught upon gamma. So this essentially, this whole number becomes the total number of secondary cases which are generated by a single infected individual during the infectious period. And that is what the basic reproduction number as I defined it. So we have both the interpretation, biological and mathematical for this basic reproduction number, and therefore this is an important quantity. As I mentioned, that this is important quantity when we are going to understand whether the disease will die out or disease will persist. Further modifications are possible with this model. For example, here we have taken the 3 classes. Now here we have assumed that recovery, in the previous case, we have assumed that after being recovered, the individual was moving back to the susceptible class. That means individual was again susceptible. But here we are assuming that after recovery, the individual is actually recovered. He has obtained the permanent immunity. So he moves to another class, which is recovered class. That means he's no longer getting the infection and he's immune forever. In addition to these parameters, beta and gamma, we have also introduced there certain other parameters. That is lambda and mu. Mu is essentially the death rate, natural death rate. And this can be also interpreted the similar way as the gamma was. So 1 by mu is the total time period one spends in the compartment. That means it is total lifetime. 1 by mu is the total lifetime. Say for example, 50 years or 60 years for human individuals. So 1 by mu will be approximately 50 or 60 years. Lambda is the constant inflow rate of susceptible individuals. That means the population which is naturally joining, obviously it will be joining the susceptible population. That is also an assumption that it is assumed that there is no vertical transmission. That means from mother to child, there is no transmission of the disease. So any individual who is born, he is healthy. So this is your constant inflow rate. This is your infection rate. This is your death rate. And here we have also assumed there is a disease-related death rate. So there is a possibility. So depending on what kind of, assumption you keep on plugging, what kind of disease you are dealing, you can keep on modifying the model. You can keep on modifying the model, and you will be getting the different models. So this is an SIR model. SIR model with demographic effect, that means with birth and death. So that's common death is considered mu, death rate is considered mu in all the population. So we get like very simple modification to our model. And further, this model can be modified to another model if the disease is not providing you permanent immunity, rather it is providing you immunity for shortened time period. Then the disease, this model can be converted into a model which is called SIRS, S to I to R, and then there is a delta not R. So these are the people who are losing their immunity. So that means that the immunity is partial, and then you actually move to the susceptible class again after spending certain time in your immune class. This happens in certain kind of chickenpox disease, like they provide immunity for certain time periods for 7 to 8 years or 10 years or something like that. And then individuals move to the susceptible class. So again, with the analysis as we have done earlier, the rate of the change of infective will be positive or negative according to this number, beta S over mu plus delta plus gamma, less or equals to or bigger than or equals to 1. That means again we can define this as the basic reproduction number, where this basic reproduction number is defined as beta lambda by mu. So here this is lambda by mu. Lambda by mu is the population. When there is no infection, you can say it is actually if the whole population there was no infection, then you can see as t goes to infinity, your S goes to lambda by mu. So there is a way to actually define this one. So this is the simplest way to probably understand at this moment with the limited understanding. And those who have the understanding of infectious disease modeling, they can figure out that this number can be found by finding out your disease-free equilibrium. We call it disease-free equilibrium. And those equilibrium are found by equating these numbers, these rates to 0 and solving those equations. So after solving these equations, you get the equilibriums are the solution. And mathematically, what we mean is that we want to find out those solutions which are actually, which do not change with time. So ds over dt is equals to 0. That means that S is not changing with respect to time. So that's why they are equilibrium. So essentially we get our R0 in this case as this, and with this R0, I think we can help ourselves to understand that how can we reduce. So how can we reduce this number to be less than 1? So this number can be reduced to be less than 1 by reducing beta, which can be easily seen reducing beta or increasing gamma. Because other parameters you see lambda and mu, these are your population parameters. So they can, you cannot change birth and you cannot change death, natural birth and natural death. Disease-related death can be increased, but you don't like the disease-related death to be increased. That means your control parameters should be only beta and gamma. Either by decreasing beta or by increasing gamma, you can reduce your R0. So this is very important aspect that your control interventions, control interventions, they do have correlation with this particular threshold parameter. Further, the model can be defined in the form of SEIR model. Why did I keep this particular slide? There is a relation with this one. So this is just to tell you that you can keep on adding the partitions or the compartments. And depending on the flow of those compartments, you can keep on getting different kind of models. So this addition of the compartment is not random, rather it is dependent on the disease. So suppose that if the disease provides you a latency, that means the individuals, instead of becoming immediately infected, they take some time to become infected. You have to consider another class where the latently infected individuals reside. And after spending that time period in that particular class, they move to the infectious class. So as I was talking about the disease-free equilibrium or the equilibrium, here you can see that lambda by mu 0, 0, 0 is the disease-free equilibrium. And one can actually do the calculation of basic production number R0. And R0 turns out to be A, kappa, beta, lambda over mu plus kappa, mu plus gamma. And if this number is less than 1, then the disease will die out. There is an interpretation about this number. This again, the number is beta is again as the number of contacts. Lambda by mu is the total population, which is susceptible, total healthy population. Kappa upon mu plus kappa is the fraction of the population which is becoming from infectious class, which is moving to the infective. So it is the fraction of the population which is becoming infectious. And 1 by mu plus gamma is the time period which an infected individual is spending in the infected class. So this is 1 by mu plus gamma. This is kappa by mu plus kappa. This is the fraction of the population which is becoming infectious. So this whole number which we have found here, this is actually basic reproduction number. And how did we find this number? This number is actually found by using the characteristic equation of the linearized matrix of the model system around the disease-free equilibrium. And what is the characteristic equation? This is the characteristic equation of the linearized matrix. And from that characteristic equation, we have done the calculation. The point of this slide is that we can actually calculate the basic reproduction number by finding out the eigenvalues of the corresponding linearized matrix. And we don't need to, resort ourselves to the way we have calculated for SIE and SIS and SIRS model earlier. So corresponding to the eigenvalue of the linearized matrix, we can figure out that what will be the basic reproduction number. Because our stress during this time of talk was on the basic reproduction number and control of the disease via this basic reproduction number. There are other ways of finding out basic reproduction number also, that is known as next generation matrix, but we are not going to discuss that here. So what is the summary of this part which I have covered so far? The summary of this part is that the modeling of infectious diseases is a continuous process, as we have seen that depending on disease, depending on how the pathogens react, this is a continuous process. No model can be perfect because one model can give you one kind of information, and another model can give you another kind of information. So this depends on the questions which you impose, and this also depends on the assumptions, as we have mentioned that certain assumptions when we were moving through the models, that the recovery is there or recovery is not there. After recovery, individual is getting susceptible or he is becoming immune to the disease. So depending on the assumptions, and assumptions will be governed by the particular disease or the information about the disease or the goal of the question which you want to study. So there are many things which gets into when we do this kind of modeling. Further addition of the compartments, further addition of compartments is possible depending on the disease and the control interventions which one wants to study. For example, one may consider the vaccinated class, one may consider the quarantine class, the isolated class, the hospitalization, that is the medical treatment, and so on and so forth. So many such classes may be considered, and the model can be modified further. A very clear understanding about the system is needed when you are framing a model, and if you want to frame a proper model. One must be very careful while making any prediction also change. So therefore, the assumptions are very important because if you are making a prediction, your predictions may go wrong once the assumptions are changed. And situation is very dynamic. So if the situation is very dynamic, then also things will change. This is very important point here, which I have mentioned here. The modelers must act responsibly. Whenever you are making a prediction, it should not cause panic. For example, we have seen certain kind of models during the COVID that certain numbers during certain time periods, certain numbers of infectives will be there. Some of them were not absolutely correct. That is because it is always dependent. Prediction is always dependent on assumptions, and therefore it is very important to mention that your model is the best case or the worst case scenario. That means that you are actually underlining the assumptions, and you are making sure that when you are giving a prediction, people do understand that these predictions are either the best case scenario or the worst case scenario, and the things will change once the model assumptions are changed. The control of disease depends on the various factors such as the availability of resources, proper utilization of those resources, the behavior of society at large, and therefore these factors they do have a lot of impact on the disease dynamics. Certain important aspect, one important aspect is actually I did not cover about is the estimation of the parameter. How should you know that which parameter, what is the value of the parameter? And this particular link, which I have kept here in this slide, that that can help you in understanding how to do the basic fitting of the models and how to estimate the parameters. So parameters are done via solving the differential equations, matching them with the data, and then getting the error, and then minimizing the error and doing that. So that process is very easily explained on this particular website, though there are many other places where one can find, but I believe that if you have not done anything in that line, then this will be a very good place to start with. So I am almost closing, I am almost nearing to the close of the session, and therefore I will move to another part of this talk, which is about COVID-19 models. So kindly give me 1 minute. So I wanted to show you some more results which were done by us, which were related to the how public perception changes when the disease spreads, and how the economy or the cost of interventions comes into effect. But I think I'm not left with much time, so I'm skipping that part there. And I am moving to this part of mathematical models of COVID-19. So I will be brushing through these slides quickly, and some comments are there, beginning with some comments in the Indian context. So there are various models proposed to study and predict the COVID-19 status in India. Every model has its merit and its demerits. As I mentioned, that this is because of the assumptions which one has considered, and one should not read too much from these models, as the scenario is very dynamic. Some of the glimpses are provided how the information is being used by public health officials in next couple of slides in Indian context, I must emphasize. So, for example, these slides are taken from the news briefing of Public Press Information Bureau on 22nd of May. You can see the data. We normally see the data just as normally the data when it is given to a normal individual. The data, this is like the new cases which is growing. You can see the bars. So new cases, these bars are new cases which is growing. But how do we see when we have that modeling point of view? Is that here for each of this data they have calculated the growth rate. So if you see this 3rd of April, so on 3rd of April is the point. This is post lockdown period. So before that, the growth of the infective was roughly in the vicinity of 15 to 20%. And after that, you can see here, there is a clear decline of growth of infective. So the clear decline of growth in infective, this rate has declined from the data of the infective. So that is one of the impact of lockdown. There are other estimates which were mentioned in that conference. Let me go to the summary of this slide. So the summary of estimates that what impact your lockdown had. So they provided the estimates from 5 groups. These are 5 research groups in India. Not all in India actually. This BCG is actually Boston Consultancy Group. So they have provided that how many cases are averted and how many deaths have been averted. So in the first column, there is number of cases averted. 13 to 29 lakh cases were averted, and roughly around 37,000 to 78,000 deaths were averted. And this is the link where you can find this whole news brief and all the details about this particular slide. So what I mean to why did I keep this particular slide here is that these mathematical models, they are being used by public health officials in getting the information, extracting the information, and then utilizing that information for the betterment of the public. This is another model. This is another model which is again in the Indian context. So this model was published in March in Medical Journal of Armed Forces of India. I kept this model because this model correlates with our analysis or the discussion which we had. This is about an S susceptible. So this model is basically a susceptible, exposed, infective, quarantined, recovered, and death class model, where the individuals are divided into these classes. And these are the estimates here. These are the outcomes of the model. So if you are interested, this is the DOI link of the paper. These are the predictions. These predictions were given on mid-March in this paper. The paper was submitted on 23rd of the March, and the predictions were made for the 25th of May. At that time, the growth rate was about 15%, and therefore they have estimated that total cases will be about 2 million cases will be there. If you put a lockdown, so they have proposed a control strategy that if you put a lockdown, then by 25th May, the total cases will be around 2.5 lakh. And so roughly you can say that with a delay of maybe around 2 weeks, the number is more or less fine around that. So the cases have declined by 50%. So this model or similar model can be helpful in getting these numbers, that how many cases, possible cases will be there, how many hospitalizations, how many individuals you will need for the hospitalizations if you don't put the lockdown and if you put the lockdown, how many people in the ICU you will need, or how many ICU facilities you will need if you don't put the lockdown and if you put the lockdown. Lockdown is in the sense of the control intervention, which is there. So if you provide a control intervention, then and if you don't provide a control intervention, then what will be the differences? In fact, this is very interesting that how these models have changed the public policy. This is an article from the Nature, the snap of article from the Nature, the special report. Those who are interested, you can go to the Neil Ferguson. This is N.M. Ferguson. This is prepared from N.M. Ferguson et al. Neil Ferguson, he is a mathematical biologist from, or the mathematical modeler from UK. So he and his group provided a model where they have estimated that in UK alone, there might be more than 500,000 deaths if government take no action. So if you don't take any action, there will be around 500,000 deaths. And this analysis led to Prime Minister Boris Johnson of UK to immediately announce for stringent restriction on the people movement. So there are details of this particular model. One can, if one is interested, one can go through that how these numbers are calculated. And this is a graph where the black color shows that if you don't take any control measure, how the number of infectives will grow. This black color is do nothing. Okay, and then of course this blue color is when you do isolation, social distancing, and keep older people also at home. And this is about the deaths which are possible, total number of deaths. So these are the total deaths in black color is for the Great Britain and blue color is for US. So they have calculated that for Great Britain, there will be around 500,000 cases, deaths, and if nothing is done. And for UK, for US, this is blue in color, these numbers will be almost 2 million cases. And this modeling led to the social distancing and lockdown measures in UK. So there is a lot of work which is there done by the Neil Ferguson. This is another of his work which tells about that how the control strategies, the mitigated and unmitigated strategies, they will change the scenario, and how the deaths will be this last D1 is actually for the deaths. So how the deaths will be reduced. These blue color are when the mitigation of the strategies are there in rest of the part of the world. So these are the different part of the world. The first one is East Asia and Pacific, and the last one is Sub-Saharan African. So how the deaths can be averted if you take the control measures. The preprint is available there. This is also from the Ferguson's group. This is another interesting case. I wanted to put this model because this shows very interesting case. I will request the organizers to provide me 5 extra minutes. This is very interesting case, the COVID-19 epidemic. Here, as I mentioned earlier, that it depends that what kind of question you want to address. So this group wanted to address that what will be the impact of latency period. Latency period is the period of being infected to being what you call is that infectious. So this is the graph which shows here. This is the graph which shows here about the latency period. And then there is incubation period, which is about the being symptomatic and asymptomatic. So the whole population was divided into parts like susceptible, exposed, asymptomatic, but infectious, asymptomatic and reported, symptomatic and unreported. So these are the 5 classes they have divided the population. This is the flow chart of all the infected individual, and this is the infection rate they have taken. So they have considered it to be tau naught for a certain time period, t less or equals to n, and beyond n, they have taken it to be exponentially decaying rate. And they consider this exponentially decaying rate because they assume that once the number reaches the time passes, the disease progresses, the control measures will be taken, and because of the control measures, the infection rate will decay. And this is how the model is being considered. You can see that the infection is developing by the interaction of susceptible individuals with infected and unreported. So these are the individuals in the asymptomatic phase, infected, and these are the unreported symptomatic individuals. So how these unreported symptomatic individuals are explained in that particular work is that there is a possibility of individuals having mild infection and they may not care, and therefore they may not go for the medical checkup, and therefore they may not know that they are actually infectious. So depending on this particular model, they have best fit for their data. The data is from China. The model is also from the early March, I suppose. So they have gone with the model and its prediction for certain values of the parameters. Then this alpha is essentially that parameter which is related with the latency. You can see here alpha E. So this is the latency period. So alpha is the parameter which is related with the latency. Therefore, for the change of alpha, they have plotted and predicted, and they actually found with the error analysis that this particular graph is the best fit, and this provides certain data or the certain information that how many individuals will be. This is the final size of the epidemic, as the time progresses, and when will be the peak of that. So this is the peak time. Also, they have also given the peak time. So it depends on the question which you raise, and it depends on that how you analyze those questions. Depending on that, your results will actually differ, and your results will actually matter. Towards the end, I would like to show or share one article from Science, which was published on May 13, that scientists are drowning in COVID-19 papers. So as COVID-19 has started, the research articles are also coming up at a very fast pace. So it is very difficult to keep track of all the research articles, and out of them, those which are giving you important information. So this is my last slide. This is my last slide just to show that how things are changing, that people are interested. They are providing a lot of information. A lot of models are being proposed with a lot of questions being addressed, and a lot of papers being published. And we have to probably focus ourselves on those works which are relevant to us. We cannot keep track of everything. This is it from my side. I thank everyone. This is epilogue of the talk. I think I should just mention that mathematical modeling is beginning and not the end. So thank you, everyone. If there is any question, I would be happy to take the question.
Yes, thank you, Prashantji, and we are very thankful to you for your nice the presentations, as well as your different models of epidemiology, mathematical, and the COVID-19, especially on COVID-19. So here are some queries, some questions from the participants. So there are some are very interesting. Some are very interesting. Let me just ask a few questions. So, sir, here is Mapui Ralte. She asks, are you working on modeling of COVID-19? Have you been working on it? Is there any possibility of working together with our team? So Mapui Ralte, she must be a student pass out from our mathematics department, Mizoram University. She asks for the collaborations.
Yeah. So Mapui, yes, at present we are working on this. Though I did not have anything, or I did not show anything which is related to my personal work, because that has not come into public domain yet. We are still working on it. And yes, if you have interesting idea, I will be very much happy to work with you. At the very beginning of my talk, I have shared my email, and you can also ask Dr. Sarat, or you can just check my name, Prashant Srivastava with IIT Patna, and you can mail me. We can further talk about it. Yes, Dr. Sarat, next please.
Next, their home remedies like lemonade, ginger, garlic, and turmeric help to cure COVID-19. To what extent? This is Rana Babu. He want to have this kind of query, like when some food items which are available with us. So is it possible to cure COVID-19?
So so far I have, this is not my domain of expertise or domain of understanding, but so far I have not found anything which is scientific literature where it can be shown that lemonade, ginger, or garlic, or these kind of substances can help in reducing the COVID-19. But of course, these materials, they boost immunity. And certain times, if your immunity is stronger, you may not contract, or even if you're contracting, the infection might be mild. So definitely this may help to those who are healthy individuals and their immunity is better. So they can improve the immunity, but this, as far as I know, or as far as I understand, this is not going to, used as a protective measure.
Next questions. Could you explain how far COVID-19 be held using hydrochloroquine and BP drug besides paracetamol? Is there, sir, any?
No, I'm sorry. I cannot make any comment on this one.
Okay. So next question is very interesting. In the SIS models, it is given di by dt greater than 0 to both cases.
Yeah,
Why?
I mentioned during my slide that there was a typographical error. I mentioned it, this is like first case di over dt greater than 0, second case di over dt less than 0.
Okay. And
So
next,
that was a typographical error.
okay. Next questions. How can I use stochastic model for COVID-19?
Oh,
Some,
that's very interesting. Actually, you can use most of the models. They use the probabilistic cases like there is always a chance for of transmission. So if you have most of the computation, they are also stochastic. So without stochastic, we cannot progress. So the whole scenario is actually depending on chance. No one can predict for a longer time period because of the chance which is involved. So if somebody is able to make a probabilistic model, then one can definitely do that. This is very interesting. Yes. All I was talking about regarding the questions which one raised and this SEIR model, they are the simpler one. That does not mean that these SEIR models are actually completely deterministic model, because there are parameters which are involving stochasticity in it. So definitely the stochasticity is there. Yes, next please.
next, the parameters to be considered will not be finite in generating any mathematical model. This is Anand Munagala, the questions like this. Are the parameters to be considered in modeling will not be finite in generating mathematical models.
I am not sure what he want to ask. Probably he want to ask that these parameter values will be finite. Then yes, the values will be finite. If you want to ask the number of parameters will be finite, yes, the number of parameters will also be finite. Because what you are doing is that you are dealing with the realistic scenario. You are not dealing with something which is unmanageable. So mathematically, there are so many parameters, but ultimately everything depends. Everything is correlated. So I am not very sure with the question. I'm sorry.
Okay, next, is there any concrete rule to select mathematical model reasonably so that a proper predictions could be done? Is
Yes.
there?
So the answer to this is this is usually done with the available data or the real life data, and then how good you can predict. So you can say that you make a prediction and then you again go back and check your prediction. So let us say somebody make a prediction for the 25th May and then for the 11th of June. So one may check oneself at the 25th May, and then if there is a correction, then one must correct that. So definitely this is the way, the validation, we call it validation. So validation is the way of making a model better and better always, but there is no existing any such rule. You can't say that this is the rule of working, but because mathematical modeling is a continuous process, it just keeps on going. So it gives you, and everything is dynamic. Even the behavior of the people is so dynamic, it keeps on changing, and therefore there cannot be any specific rule to select a model. All I can mention, and again I can reiterate that it depends on the question which you are asking. If your model is able to provide answer to the question which you are asking, it is good enough. For example, I have given one model by the Magel's group, Pierre Magel, where he talked about the latency. And in that case, they were able to address that latency question. So for them, that model is good enough. That model may not predict the actual numbers, because it is modeling, it's not magic. We can't give numbers.
Yeah, absolutely right. Sir, one more
Yes,
questions.
please.
This is Asemingosa Singh. He questions like this: why disease model is always in linear differential equations, not non-linear?
No, I have presented all the models, they were non-linear only.
I think non-linear is also there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think probably he want to ask maybe that why they are non-linear and not linear. Maybe the question might be that.
Yeah.
I will answer both of them. Let us see which one helps him. That the models are non-linear because the system, there is an interaction and the interaction is non-linear, it is not linear. And therefore we usually get non-linear models. And if you are asking that why we don't have linear model, then the linear model usually follows, or any linear system usually follows what is called principle of superposition. But naturally, the principle of superposition does not work for the case of natural systems or man-made systems. 1 + 1 is not 2 always. So that's why we don't have the linear models. We usually have non-linear models.
So I think there are many questions coming up. So, but I think it's all the participants better to have any query. Please write to me or either Prashant. You can directly email to me also. So that for that queries. So here is the last questions. So let the others please ask the email or may send the WhatsApp questions to the Prashant or me. So we will definitely try to give the answers. So now, according to you, what is the estimated time to the end of these pandemics, means this COVID-19, and how much people are going to infected in the near future? This is very interesting in one sense.
Okay, so I believe this is the last question. So before I answer this question, because I'm not going to give a clear answer to this question. So before I answer this question, as Dr. Sarat has mentioned, kindly write email to me or to Dr. Sarat, and I will try to address all your questions, whatever question you have, howsoever you want to take that question. I will try to answer it definitely. I will definitely reply to the email for sure. So you please send email to me and I will answer your question. Coming back to the question now, I cannot say, okay? I cannot say about anything about this, and we have already mentioned that even nobody can say because the system is so dynamic. Every single time, if every individual changes, I could not show you a couple of my slides where I was about to show that behavioral changes depend, they actually impact a lot on the disease dynamic. So therefore, it is very difficult to say anything about how the numbers will be. All the numbers will be dependent on the control measures, on the control interventions, on people's behavior, and nothing is there to be panic. People who are responsible, they will be taking due actions, and we should just do our part. So we will be making short-time predictions, but I will not say that when the disease might be dying out. I cannot say. I don't think that anybody whosoever is understanding mathematical modeling can say that.
Finally,
yes, this is it from my side, Dr. Sarat.
Thank you, Prashant Kumar Srivastava, for your nice presentations and about the mathematical modeling on the epidemiology and the mentions about some of the very interesting points like SIR models, SEIR models, and COVID-19 models are analyzed. So thank you very much. So next speaker, so it is
Thank you everyone.
Yes, thank you. Next speaker is Shanta Laishram from the IIT Delhi. So my friend, the Dr. JP, will introduce our Shanta Laishram to the participants.
Good morning to all. Myself, Dr. Jaiprakash Singh, Head of Department Mathematics and Computer Science Department. So I would like to introduce second speaker. He is very renowned mathematician in his field. So Dr. Shanta Laishram, he is from ISI Delhi. So he did his master and awarded Ph.D. under Professor T.M. Sore, a renowned number theorist from TIFR Mumbai. Title of his thesis is Refinements, Extension and Generalization of a Theorem of Sylvester on the prime factor of a product of consecutive integers. He was awarded TAA Harishchandra Award for Best PhD Thesis in Mathematics. He was postdoctoral fellow at Department of Pure Mathematics, University of Waterloo, Canada, from August 2007 to August 2009. His research interests are Diophantine equations, irreducibility of polynomials, transcendental number theory, and Diophantine approximation, prime numbers, and cryptography, particularly the number theoretic aspect of cryptography. He was academic visitor of ETH Zurich and Max-Planck Institute for Mathematics, Bonn, Germany, August to October 2008. He has been awarded INSA Bilateral Exchange Award uh, by Indian National Science Academy, Government of India. He got Microsoft Young Faculty Award 2010 and 11 by Microsoft Research India in 2011. He has published many research publications in international reviewed journals. He was the deputy team leader of Indian team at European Girls Mathematical Olympiad 2009 at Ukraine. He has been involved in a number of national and international research projects. He has visited many countries like USA, UK, Spain, Germany, France, Canada, Austria. The list is very long. Belgium, Brazil, Finland, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Laos, Myanmar, Netherlands, Philippines, South Africa, Switzerland, Thailand, and Ukraine, and many more to come. Once again, I thanks to uh, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Mizoram University, Professor K.R.S. Sambasivarao, sir, for allowing us to arrange this webinar. I would like to thank my colleague, Dr. Sarat Singh, to give this opportunity to introduce uh, uh, Dr. Shanta Laishram, sir. So I wish a very fruitful and productive meeting. Thank you. So now, Shanta sir, please go ahead for your presentation.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank Mizoram University, particularly the Vice Chancellor, and my friend Dr. Sarat, and also to you for your nice introduction. So today I'll be talking about some important work and interesting work in the world of integer sequences, particularly binary recurrence sequences. Now, let me see if I can share the screen. Okay, I think that's possible.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so can you all see my screen?
Yes, yes, yes. We can see.
Okay, so yeah, so I prepared my talk, this binary recurrence sequences and arithmetic in such a way that almost everyone of you would be able to understand at least 50 to 60% of my talk. I mean, I put it for a more wider audience. So yeah, please feel free to ask me any questions after the presentations, or maybe in between if something interesting is there. So let me now begin my talk. So as you all know, You see, in mathematics or in world of model sciences, we use a lot of sequences, lot of integer sequences. And all of you have heard of this sequence called Fibonacci sequence, right? So there's a sequence, it's a recurrent sequence starting with 0, 1. Then the next term is sum of previous two terms. So 0, 1, 1, 2, then 1 plus 2 is 3, 2 plus 3 is 5, and so on. So it's a sequence which goes infinitely, is towards infinity. And this is a very special case with a very general sequence called binary recurrent sequences. Not only Fibonacci, there are many other interesting sequences in nature, but today I'll be concentrating more on this family of general binary recurrent sequences. Just before I go to general binary recurrent sequences, all of you know what is this golden ratio, that is 1 plus root 5 by 2. So interesting thing is that if you take the quotient of Fibonacci, nth plus 1 term of Fibonacci over nth term of Fibonacci, it goes to the golden ratio. But I mean, when you see, look at it, it looks very interesting, but this is a very special case of what I'm going to show is a general phenomenon. So let me now go to the, let me define what's a binary recurrence sequence. So a binary recurrence sequence is an integer sequence which starts at 0, then it can, next term is 1. It's like Fibonacci, so 0, 1, but then it satisfies the linear recurrence sequence with nth plus 2 term is r times nth plus 1 term plus s times nth term. So what I've shown here is in this screen. So this is how the recurrence works. And as you can see, in case of Fibonacci, r equal to s equal to 1. So that's the most basic of this recurrence sequences, and that's why mostly well studied. And such sequences are called Lucas sequence of first kind, and will denote such sequence by UN, which is depending on RNS. So the sequence depending on RNS. Now let's start with such sequence. So I'm going to take RNS to be co-prime integers, and I'm considering such Lucas sequence of first kind. Now you form the quadratic equation x square minus rx minus s equal to 0. So this is called the characteristic equation of this sequence, and the discriminant of this equation is called the discriminant of the sequence. So we're not interested in a sequence whose discriminant is 0. We call them degenerate sequences. So it's an easy exercise to see that if alpha and beta are the roots of this equation, x square minus rx minus s is 0, then the term un can be written in a closed nice form as alpha n minus beta n by alpha minus beta. So this is a very interesting thing. So basically, though the sequence, they look very, it goes to infinity, we may not, doesn't seem to have a control, but at least we have a formula. Once you know your R and S, you solve the equation for alpha and beta, which are the roots of this x square minus rx minus s is 0. And then un becomes alpha n minus beta n by alpha minus beta. And not only that, if you take, for any positive integer, if you take alpha power n plus beta power n, this is also an integer. And this is actually also another sequence. We call Vn the Lucas sequence of second kind. In fact, when n is 0, as you can see, V0 is 2. When n is 1, alpha plus beta is actually R, so V1 is R. And interestingly, it satisfies the same recurrence as the original one. V of n plus 2 is R times Vn plus 1 plus S times Vn. So this is called Lucas sequence of second kind. So let me just put it in front of you once again. So Lucas sequence of first kind is that un is given by alpha n minus beta n by alpha minus beta. And of course, so u0 is 0, u1 is 1, and it satisfies this recurrence. U of n plus 2 is r times un plus 1 plus s times un. And Lucas sequence of second kind is Vn is alpha n plus beta n, and V0 is of 2, V1 is R, and it satisfies the same recurrence. So V of n plus 2 is R times V of n plus 1 plus S times Vn. You should remember that alpha and beta are the roots of the equation x square minus Rx minus S equal to 0. So alpha and beta can be integer, can be real, can be complex. And definitely it's a so alpha and beta are complex conjugates when R square plus 4S is less than 0. Now, let me come to some of the well-known sequences. As I mentioned in Fibonacci sequence. So this is sequence which has a nice form given by alpha is 1 plus root 5 by 2, beta is 1 minus root 5 by 2. And the Lucas sequence is alpha n plus beta n, where alpha is 1 plus root 5 by 2 and beta is 1 minus root 5 by 2. And these are the first few terms of the sequence. So it starts at 2, then 1, 2 plus 1 is 3, 1 plus 3 is 4, and so on. Another interesting sequence, these are called Pell numbers. Actually, this comes from the Pell's equation. So Pell sequence is a sequence with R equal to 2, S equal to 1. So as you can see, by solving the equation, roots of this x square minus 2x minus 1 is 1 plus root 2 and 1 minus root 2. So it has a nice form 1 plus root 2n minus 1 minus root 2n by root 2. And these are the first few terms of this sequence. So 0, 1, then 2 into 1 plus 0, then 2 into 2 plus 1, 5, and so on. And similarly, we have this companion Pell numbers or Pell-Lucas numbers. This is given by 1 plus root 2n plus 1 minus root 2n. So this is another interesting sequence. And when you look at this sequence, numbers like 2 power n minus minus 1 power n by 3, it doesn't seem that it's a recurrent sequence, but actually it turns out that it's a recurrent sequence with R equal to 1, S equal to 2. These are called Jacobson numbers. And these are first few terms of this Jacobson numbers, 0, 1, 1, 3, 5, and so on. And the other Jacobson-Lucas numbers are either plus 1 after power of 2 or minus 1 after power of 2, depending on n is even and odd. And these are the first few, 2, 1, 5, 7. These are actually either when n is even, this is power of 2 plus 1. When n is odd, power of 2 minus 1. And another interesting sequence was the powers of 2 minus 1. So like 2 square minus 1, 2 cube minus 1, 2, 4 minus 1, and so on. So these are called Mersenne numbers. This is a sequence with R equal to 3, S equal to minus 2. And similarly, Mersenne-Lucas numbers are sequence like 2n plus 1. So 2 square plus 1, 2 cube plus 1, and so on. These are called Mersenne-Lucas numbers. This is also a Lucas sequence of second kind. Not only in the sequence numbers, we can also talk about polynomials. If you, if you put R equal to x and S equal to 1, then you can make a sequence of polynomials. This is called Fibonacci polynomials. Or the Vn with R equal to x and S equal to 1, this gives a Lucas polynomials. So these are some well-known binary recurrence sequences. Now let me talk about some properties of these sequences. So first of all, as I mentioned you, it has a nice form. So un is alpha power n minus beta power n divided by alpha minus beta. So without loss of generality, we're going to take the modulus of alpha bigger than or equal to modulus of beta. So and discriminant is alpha r square plus 4s, which turns out that it's actually alpha minus beta square. And there's a nice formula which connects un and vn. So vn is square minus the discriminant times un square is 4sn. So this we can see easily from the above formula. And un satisfies u of 2n, 2 times un is un in vn. And also similarly, you can like 3 times 3n of u of 3n or v of 3n, so you can factor accordingly. These are some simple properties which follows from this Binet formula. Un is alpha power n, minus beta power n by alpha, alpha beta, alpha minus beta, and so on. So here I'm going to talk about so-called strong divisibility properties. So what is strong divisibility sequence? A sequence is a strong divisibility sequence if whenever the GCD of n and m is d, the nth term and mth term of the sequence, their GCD is the dth term. So basically, our sequence un is a strong divisibility sequence. If n and m are is d, then un is equal to GCD of um is ud. In particular, if n divides m, then un divides un. So these are strong divisibility sequences. And in case of Vn, like if m divides, if n divides m and m by n is an odd integer, then Vn divides Vm. And also another property is that from this it follows that GCD of um and un by um divides m by n. So these are some interesting properties which follows from the above sequence. And for a prime p, the up is divisible by either by u1 or itself. So like primes, they behave like primes in practice. Like you know the primes divisors of 1 and p. Similarly, the sequence of terms, the terms which divides up are either u1 or up. And for a odd prime p, divisors of bp, p term is either b1 or bp. So these are some properties which behave like our integers. So some other properties. Now the question is that you have these are infinite sequences. Then we can ask. So for any prime p, does it divide any? So given a prime p, is there a term which divides the which is divisible by p? This may not be true for all. So for example, so if p is a prime which divides s, our number s, then p doesn't divide un for every n. For example, if you look at a sequence 2 power n minus 1, s is s is 2. So prime 2 doesn't divide this sequence. Similarly, for any prime dividing s, p doesn't divide un. And if p divides the discriminant, then it turns out that p actually divides the p term. So p divides up. And if for a prime p which doesn't divide the discriminant r square plus 4s and which doesn't divide s, and if the Legendre symbol of discriminant over p is 1, then p divides u of p minus 1. And p is an odd prime not covered by above, then p divides u of p plus 1 term. So these are some interesting properties which actually which one can prove. Is it not so difficult properties which one can prove it? So it tells you that except for primes dividing s, so given any prime, it always divides the term of the sequence. So now let me define this so-called rank of appreciation. You see, given any n, so you start taking a positive integer m. So take the least positive integer such that m divides un, but m doesn't divide u1, u2, un minus 1. Then n is called the rank of appreciation of m. In particular, when m is a prime, we're interested more in such things. So we call the rank of, we denote the rank of appreciation of p by rp. So from the previous slide, it follows that actually rp divides p minus 1 or rp divides p plus 1 if p doesn't divide the discriminant and p doesn't divide s. And if p divides discriminant, then rp is actually p. And it also follows easy to see that if p divides, if rp divides n or p divides un, then rp divides n. So this rank of appreciation allows us to define so-called primitive divisors. So it's an interesting and widely studied divisors of any sequence. So basically how a primitive divisor is defined is the following. Given a positive integer n, if there's a prime p which divides un, and that prime doesn't divide u1, u2, u3 up to un, and also it doesn't divide the discriminant r square plus 4s, then such a prime is called a primitive divisor of un. So when n is p is the primitive divisor of n, then rp is actually n, and since p doesn't divide discriminant and s, actually rp divides p of plus or minus 1. And that tells you that primitive divisors always congruent to either plus 1 modulo n or minus 1 modulo n. Similarly, for the sequence Vn, we can define a primitive divisor. So it's also a primitive divisor of Bm is Vn is that p doesn't divide any v1, v2, vn minus 1, and p doesn't divide discriminant. So then such primes are called primitive divisors of Vn. And here we can see easily that primitive divisors of Vn are congruent to 1 or minus 1 modulo 2n. So then you may say, okay, this looks very simple, but in practice or in theory, trying to show that primitive divisor always exists, this is not that easy. Actually, it started with the work of Carmichael in 1913, who showed that actually the primitive divisors always exist for n bigger than 12 when discriminant is positive. So in particular, you see f of 12 is 144, and f of 12, 144 doesn't have a primitive divisor. So Carmichael showed that in case of Fibonacci, after 12 term, everything has a primitive prime divisor. Not only that, for any sequence with discriminant positive has a primitive divisor when n is bigger than 12. But in case of when discriminant is negative, that means alpha and beta are complex numbers. Life is not that easy. Actually, it took a long time. Only in 1974 that Singh was able to prove by using deep methods from transcendence theory that given any sequence, there is some n naught which is sufficiently large such that when n is bigger than n naught, primitive prime divisors exist. Here it was effective. Effective means that in practice there is a way to compute, but its numbers are usually too big. And after 3 years, Stewart, so he made it explicit by showing that actually if n is bigger than this very big number, e power 452 times 467, 4 power 67, then primitive prime divisors exist. Now imagine, this was in 1977. Even if by using computers it's not that easy to show that given any sequence, the primitive prime divisor exists from a smaller number. So there was further work to reduce the bound, and after a long gap of around 20 years, Paul Bottier, he by using linear form till logarithms, which is the idea developed by Alan Becker, one of the Fields Medal winners. So by using this technique from linear form till logarithm, he reduced this big number e power 452 times 4 power 67 to around 10 power 10, and again after 2 years to 30,030. So basically, when n is bigger than 30,030, there's a primitive prime divisor. So now, but then of course, what happens below that? So then there's a fundamental work of Billou, Handrod, and Bottier in 2000, who showed that whenever n is bigger than 30, the primitive prime divisors always exist. And not only that, they were able to give explicitly for the n less than 30 and pairs R and S such that UN doesn't have a primitive prime divisor. So for example, in case of Fibonacci sequence, primitive prime divisor doesn't exist only when F1, F2 is 1, F5 is 5, F6 is 8, and F12 is 144. In fact, we can use this fact that Fibonacci, in the Fibonacci sequence, primitive prime divisor exists after 12 to show that, to give another proof of infinitude of primes. Because primitive prime divisor exists means therefore every n there's a different prime, so primes has to be infinite. And this result of Billou, Handrod, and Bottier, this has been actually used in many contexts, in many areas to actually solve a number of equations and so on. Now I'm going to use this result and some other analytic arguments to look at certain problems involving binary recurrence sequences. Before that, let me just give you a list. So list of primes, prime powers bigger than 3 where primitive prime divisor doesn't exist. So 5, 7, 13 are the primitive, the powers, prime or prime powers bigger than 3 such that primitive prime divisor doesn't exist. RNS and listen. So when R is 1s equal to 1s Fibonacci, so U5 is 5 or U5 is plus or minus 1 for other sequences and so on. And similarly for the sequence Vn, the prime powers bigger than 3 where primitive divisors may not exist are 4, 5 and 9. And these are some sequences. Okay, so now I've told you about some properties of binary recurrence sequences and primitive prime divisors. And now the question is that why, why do we study primitive prime the binary recurrence sequences? You see, the binary recurrence sequences are subsequence of integers, and being a subsequence of integers, we like to study its properties. We like to see, does it have interesting properties? So, for example, we know that there are infinitely many primes binary sequences in integers. We can ask, are there infinitely many prime values in our binary recurrence sequence? In particular, this for Fibonacci, do we have many Fibonacci numbers which are primes? Right now, this is an open problem. We even don't know how to prove it yet. And we can also ask similar other questions like, in the sequence of binary, in the binary recurrence sequence, are there infinitely many perfect powers? Or are there infinitely many factorials? So, or are there infinitely many Catalan numbers and many more? We can keep asking a lot of questions. So in this talk, I'm going to focus on 2 such problems. One is factorials in binary recurrence sequence, and one is Catalan numbers in a binary recurrence sequence. I'm going to define all those things. So let me start with the factorials in a sequence. Yeah, so any short question here now? Okay, so yeah, so then I'm going to go further. So yeah, so let's start with an interesting question which Paul Erdős considered. By the way, for those who don't know, the Paul Erdős, one of the most prolific mathematicians, particular number theorists from last century. And in fact, he has published more than 1,500 papers. And there's something called Erdős number. Oh, yeah, if you have written a paper with Erdős, your Erdős number is 1 and like a sequence. So he actually considered lots, he opened up lots of new areas in mathematics and number theory in particular. Then he also considered lots of problems in mathematics. So one of the problems which Erdős considered is this problem. So you know factorials. So like 2 factorials, 1 into 2 and so on. So product of first n numbers. So can you write a factorial as a product of some other smaller factorials? So that is the problem Erdős considered. So n factorial, can you write it as a1 factorial, a2 factorial, at factorial, where a1, a2, these are all these are decreasing sequence with at strictly bigger than at least 2. Now here we need to take n to be bigger than or equal to a1 plus 2, because if you take a1, n is equal to a1 plus 1, and if you take a1 to be a2 factorial, a3 factorial to at factorial minus 1, then n factorial is a1 plus 1 factorial, which is a1 factorial into a1 plus 1, which you can write it as product of factorial. So it's very trivial. It gives infinitely many trivial solutions. So that's why we're going to always consider n is at least a1 plus 2. Here we know a couple of solutions. So 9 factorial, you can write it as 7 factorial into 3 factorial square into 2 factorial. 10 factorial, you can write actually as 7 factorial into 6 factorial, which also you can write it as 7 factorial into 5 factorial into 3 factorial. In fact, 6 factorial, you can write it as 5 factorial into 3 factorial, but anyway. And 16 factorial, you can write it as 14 factorial into 5 factorial into 2 factorial. These are some well-known some solutions. But then, are there more? That's the question. So this is a conjecture of Recurrence. It was also stated by Erdős and Graham in the paper in 1980. Actually, there's conjecture that the solutions I listed are the solutions of the original equation, a factorial being a product of factorial. And till today, this is an open problem. We don't know how to prove it. In fact, forget t terms. If you just take t equal to 2, like n factorial is a1 factorial into a2 factorial, has no solution for n bigger than 10 is open. Of course, there's some the partial solutions to this problem. So it's a result of Nair and Sore in 2016 that if there's a solution to this equation, then a1 plus 1 has to be bigger than e power at. So if a1 plus 1 is less than e power at, there's no solution. And also there's a well-known result of Luca who shows that the ABC conjecture implies this solutions. And under ABC explicit ABC conjecture, people have shown that there are no solutions for n bigger than 60. So now let me tell you what is this ABC conjecture. So ABC conjecture is very simple looking problem in number theory, which is considered quite difficult. It's considered dreaming in a dream. It's called dreaming in a dream conjecture. The statement is very nice and easy to state, but of course the proof we don't know how to prove it. Statement is as follows: given let epsilon be positive, then there is a constant kappa which depends on epsilon such that whenever a, b, c are positive integers which are pairwise co-prime, that means GCD of AB is 1, GCD of BC is 1, and so on. And such that their sum is actually A plus B is C, then C is less than this kappa epsilon times the radical. Radical is product of primes which divides ABC to the power 1 plus epsilon. The statement looks very simple. So this is conjecture due to Masser and Osterle, but well known as ABC conjecture because of the way it's written. And it's one of the most difficult open problems in number theory. In fact, like around 4 or 5 Fields medalists in mathematics in area of number theory, their results follow from, their Fields medal work follow from ABC conjecture. And the Fermat's last theorem can be given as a one-line proof under ABC conjecture. So this is so powerful problem. And there's an explicit version of the Baker ABC conjecture due to Alan Baker, who is a Fields medal himself. So he saw that whenever A, B, C are pairwise co-prime that A plus B is C, then C is less than 6 by 5 times radical, which is product of primes dividing ABC times log R power omega by omega factorial. Anyway, I don't need to, I won't go further into it. So, but this is anyway, this is also open. And in a joint work with Sore, my advisor in 2012, so we saw that actually if ABC conjecture and if explicit ABC conjecture implies that like C can be written as radical times 1.75. That means original ABC conjecture with epsilon 0.75 we can obtain. And we get some other results. So that is the ABC conjecture. So if you use this version of ABC conjecture due to Sore and myself, then that Recurrence conjecture, a factorial being a product of factorials, can be solved. All right, so that is what, that is a, conditional result. Now I come to the binary recurrence sequence and connect with the factorial. So what I do is that I make a set PF, which is product of factorial. So basically, so this is a set of all numbers which are plus or minus a product of factorials. And of course, I'm taking factorials bigger than 1. And it's a result of Luca. Okay. And it's a result of Lucas who showed that if you have a product of terms of a binary recurrence sequence being a product of factorial, then there are only finally many positive integer solutions in the equation 2 I'm showing here. So n1 for this equation with n1 less than n2 less than nt, this is effectively computable number which depends on the sequence. So that means, for example, if for Fibonacci there's a number which depends on Fibonacci such that this equation has only finally many solutions. And now effectively means in principle we can compute the bounds turn out to be quite big. So this was a paper in 1999. And before I go to the some other results, let me just give you an important remark. So we're considering UN which are given by RNS with S not equal. So when S is not equal to plus or minus 1, then a prime divisor of S doesn't divide UN for any n. Hence, this equation, for example, so in this equation, the largest number mk is bounded by the modulus of S is not equal to plus or minus 1. In particular, for sequences like Mersenne sequence or Jacobson sequence, so numbers like 2 power n minus 1 or 2 power n minus 1 power n by 3, these are odd. So this has only trivial solutions. Now the problem becomes more interesting for the case when S is plus or minus 1, where we know that for every prime there's a term which is divisible by that prime. But then finding a uniform bound for or solving this completely is an interesting problem in itself. So after this work of Luca in 1999, it took actually around 7 years to show that for the Fibonacci sequence, the largest solution of this, the terms of Fibonacci being a product of factorials, with the additional restriction that all of this n1 is still less than n2 is still less than nt is given by this nice form. So f1, f2, f3, f4, f5, f6, f5, f10, f12 is 11 factorial. So basically, only term missing is f7, f9, and f11. So if you take this product, so this is the largest solution. So it took quite some time even to show for Fibonacci. So, but then for other sequences, it may be quite complicated. So what I'm going to concentrate now is on this equation. So I'll just take one term of a sequence UN and ask, when does this becomes a product of factorial? So here's, I want to state a result which I proved it, this Florian, Luca, and Max-Planck from Max-Planck is from South Africa, Florian Luca is both in South Africa and Mexico. So if you have a term of a binary sequence being a product of factorial, because why I take plus minus is that UN may be negative. So terms of sequence may be negative also. This equation implies, so whatever sequence you take, there is no solution when n is bigger than or equal to 6,300. When it is odd, and if n is even, then it's so if n is not a divisor of 48, it doesn't have a solution. So divisors of 48, even divisors of 48 are 2, 6, 12, 8, 16, 24. So and 48. So except for those even numbers which divide 48, and for any odd number, which is less than 6,300, there are no solutions. In fact, we can say better when alpha and beta are real. When alpha and beta are real, there are no solutions when outside 2, 3, 4, 6, 12. Other than the term of Fibonacci, other than when Fibonacci, in case of Fibonacci, F12 is 144 is a product of factorial. Except for this, there are no solutions. So this is quite interesting in the sense that we get a result completely independent of any sequence. So we give a bound which is completely uniform. And not only that, when n is prime, so we can show that there are no solutions. Similarly, in case of this Bn, on a Lucas sequence of second kind, we saw that if there's a solution, then n has to be 2 or n has to be odd number less than 6,300. Of course, n equal to prime, so we can say that there are no solutions. So now what we know is that for real alpha, so let me just show you this. In case of alpha, beta real numbers, we saw that if n is different from 2, 3, 4, 6, 12, there are no solutions. Now what happens when n is 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12? Can we say more? So when alpha and beta are real, this equation with n is 2, 3, 4 has infinitely many solutions, so that we can show easily. But for 6 and 12, we are not able to show it completely unconditionally. But under the ABC conjecture, we saw that this equation has only finitely many solutions. And the equation in case of Lucas sequence of second kind, there are infinitely many solutions when n is equal to 1, 2, 3. Now, so what we have done is that we give a completely explicit and absolute bound which is independent of sequence. However, of course, it's not complete. We believe that there are only finitely many solutions for 6 and 12 when alpha and beta are real, unconditional. This is an open question. And we try to also see, in general, are there many, so when alpha and beta are complex conjugates, we are not able to, for n odd, we are not able to solve for n less than 6,300. So we try to make some computations and see. So for r less than 10,000, r less than 100, and s less than 1,000, and n between 5 and 30, yeah, actually we find that there are a couple of solutions. And in fact, they're coming from n is 5, 7, or 13, or n equal to 6. So we believe that actually there are no further solutions of this equation for other than the solution I have given here. So yeah, so that's the conjecture. So only the solutions we wrote down, that should be the only solution. We don't expect any more solutions, but right now we don't know how to prove it. Also, in case of the other Lucas sequence of second kind, we expected only few solutions, but right now we don't know how to prove it. I mean, when alpha and beta complex conjugate. And it's an interesting challenge to prove, and actually to find a value of this number n naught such that the equation here un1, un2, un3 up to unt is product of factorials with n1, n2, n3 strictly increasing. So yeah, so even to find a uniform bound is not that easy. In case of Fibonacci, of course, some bound is there, but no, in general, it's not that easy to find. So this is about binary recurrence sequence being a product of factorials. Now, not only this binary recurrence sequence being a factor, so we can also try to bring in Pell's equation and talk something more. So now let me define what's a Pell's equation. So given a non-square integer d, it's a well-known fact that x square minus dy square equal to 1 has infinitely many solutions in positive integers, x and y. So these are called Brahmagupta-Pell equation or just Pell equation. A special form was first considered by Brahmagupta, but later on it was more well known as Pell. But nowadays we call it we try to give due to both of them as called Brahmagupta-Pell equation. So it follows from theory of Pell equations that there's a solution. When you find a solution with a list x, call it x1, y1, then all the solutions can be written by this form. So xk, if you xk is root dyk, where can be written as x1 plus root dy1 power k. So basically, if you write every other solution is of the form is given by this equation. And we call this the sequence of numbers. Xk, Yk is the case solution of the Pell's equation. And now instead of 1, if you can take x square minus dy square equal to -1, it may not have any solutions. But whenever it's a solution, there are infinitely many solutions. Similarly, you have similarly you have some form like xk plus root dyk is the xk plus root dyk is x1 plus root dy1 power 2k minus 1 and so on. So once you have a solution, there are infinitely many solutions, or there are no solutions for -1. And if you replace 1 by 4 and -1 by -4, so we can say something similar. So given any Pell's equation, so for any Pell's equation, you look at this sequence of solutions xk, yk, and we can ask whether xk's are product of factorial and so on. So this is this is also what we actually follow. We got as a consequence of our previous result is that if you consider a net solution in positive integers of x square minus y square, which is given by xn, yn, then xn's are, I mean, if xn is a product of factorials, then that happens only when n is 1. Basically, x2, x3, etc. can never be a product of factorial. Similarly, if you take the nth solution in positive integers of the equation y square minus dz square equal to plus or minus 4, then it's a wn is a product of factorials only when wn is 1, or the solutions given by or when n is 2, these two, w2 is 3 factorial, and you have this 3 factorial square minus 2 into 4 square is 4, and I have listed 2 more. Except for this thing, so there are no other solutions for n bigger than 1. So this is quite interesting. We have a very clean and nice result that, okay, so in case of Pell's equation or sequence given by Pell equation, there are no actually factorial except possibly for the first x1, which is the fundamental solution. Okay, all right. So this is about the factorials. Now I want to go to this so-called middle binomial coefficients and Catalan numbers. So all of you know the binomial coefficients. So n choose m. So given m, 2m choose m, which we denote by bm is called the middle binomial coefficient. And if you divide this middle binomial coefficient by m plus 1, we call these numbers Catalan numbers. So cm is given by this. It's easy to see that cm is always an integer. Of course, bm is always an integer too. Now we write dm for either bm or cm and consider set of numbers which are product of either Catalan numbers or middle binomial coefficients. So PBC is this is a set of either BMs or CMs, I mean product set of numbers which are product of BMs or CMs. In fact, Diophantine equations with members coming from product of binomial or Catalan numbers have been studied before. In fact, for example, if you the characterizing of these equations of the form so like characterizing of these solutions of PIs and QJs such that I from 1 to n IPI equal to j from 1 to r j pj, and bi for pi product is same as product of bj qj. So this has been done actually, and this system of equation rose actually from a question in topology, where they consider n-dimensional complexes which doesn't embed in R2n. So it has implications in other areas of mathematics, and people have actually looked at such sequences. So we want to look at when so when a term of a binary recurrence sequence is product of middle binomial coefficient and Catalan numbers. That's what we want to consider. Luca actually saw that, sorry, in case of Fibonacci numbers, the intersection of Fibonacci numbers and Catalan numbers occurs only when n is 5. So fifth Fibonacci number is 5, which is the third Catalan number, C3. So we're going to consider the equation. So this is the theorem we had. So, okay, so for is M, let Dm be either Bm or Cm. Then when Un is a product of this either Catalan numbers or a product of this middle binomial coefficients or Catalan numbers or combinations, then this equation implies n is bounded when n is odd, n is less than 6,500 when n is odd. And when n is even, n is less than 720. In fact, n is the divisor of 720. And further, when, so basically what we saw is that we give a bound, like the case of factorials, we give a bound completely independent of the sequence. For any type RNS, any sequence, we have an explicit bound, n less than 6,500. And when alpha and beta are real, then there are no solutions outside 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 12. So yeah, when n is bigger than 12, for example, there are no solutions. Note that U1 is 1, it's a, yeah, basically it's a Catalan number. C1 is, 1 is actually C2, this is a Catalan number. And the equation, in case of Lucas sequence of second kind, we also saw something similar. So if, yeah, so if n is less than 6,500 and 4 doesn't divide n, so I mean either n is exactly divisible by 2, then yeah, only then there may be solutions. Further, when alpha and beta are real, in that case there are no solutions outside when n is not equal to 1, 2, 3, or 6. So basically, you know, what we expect is in case of B1 is R. R can be a product of such numbers. So for 1, 2, and 3, I mean, there may be infinitely many solutions. 6 is not completely clear whether it will have infinitely many solutions or not. But in general, after 6, for anything else, there are no solutions. And like the way we consider this the solutions of Pell's equation being a factorial, we can also talk about solutions of Pell's equation being a product of being a binomial coefficient or Catalan number. So it turns out that when you consider this nth solution in positive integers of this equation, x square minus dy square equal to plus or minus 1 for some square free integer d, then the solutions xn, if they are middle binomial coefficients or Catalan numbers, then that happens only when n is equal to 1. For n bigger than 1, it never happens. Similarly, for the equation w square minus dz square equal to plus or minus 4, if you look at the solutions wn, gn, and ask when wn becomes either a Catalan number or a middle binomial coefficient, then it turns out that it may happen only for when, yeah, it never happens for n bigger than 2, bigger than 2 and 3, bigger than 3. And in fact, when n is actually 3 and 2, only then you have certain, only find actually three solutions. Except for this, no other solutions. And of course, for n equal to 1, there can be anything, but for n bigger than 1, there are only 3 solutions given by n equal to 2 or n equal to 3. So for example, when d equal to 2, the equation w square minus dz equal to plus minus 4 has a solution by 6. Actually 6 square minus 2 into 4 square is 4. And 6 is actually w2. So you have a solution. Actually, yeah, no, 2 is, yeah, so 6 is w2, actually w1 is 2. And similarly, when these 3, 14 square minus 3 at 3 times 8 square equal to 4 gives the solution as as W2 is equal to 14, where W1 is actually 4. So we are able to give complete results in the case of these solutions of this. So these are some results which I wanted to present. Now, so I want to ask Dr. Sarah, yeah, I'm not going to give a complete proof, but I just want to give some ideas of proof. I mean, not everything, but at least some ideas which one can get as a takeaway. But before that, let me also give you further questions. So we believe that a term of binary recurrence sequence being a Catalan number of Fibonacci or the binomial coefficient, that happens only, for n equal to 6, 8, and 12, we expected only finally many solutions. And similarly for Lucas sequence of second kind, we expect for n equal to 3, 6. So these are open problems. So I'll take maybe around 10 minutes. I won't give a complete proof, but I just want to give you some ideas where we combine different techniques. Basically, the proof list looks nice, but no, the statements are very nice, but the proof, actually, we need to get a lot of things are involved in the proof. And it's not that simple, but I want to just highlight some facts, important facts, which are worth knowing. So I'm going to denote the script P as either a product of factorial or product of terms of this, product of Catalan numbers or the middle binomial coefficients. So basically we're considering this UN is either a product of factorials or product of terms of a Catalan numbers or middle binomial coefficient. So for simplicity, let's consider say UN is a product of is one of these products. So our idea is very simple. So for a suitable divisor n naught of n, we're going to find a lower bound for this number m1 naught, which is, you look at all primes which are congruent to plus or minus 1 mod n naught, which divides un, and look at the contribution of the primes and take the lowest, and that is mn naught. You find a lower bound for this in a different approach, and what you again do is that you also find out this upper bound in a different approach. You see, so this number is same as, since un is same as p, so for a prime, so you look at primes which are congruent to plus or minus 1, which divide plus or minus 1 modulo n naught, when which divide p, you get the contributions. So you take upper bound for this part and lower bound for this part and compare it. Basically, when we try to prove that we choose suitable n naught such that this lower bound actually exceeds the upper bound, and that's how we get a contradiction, and hence there are no solution. That's actually idea of the proof. Idea is very looks very simple, but of course then we have to develop ways to find out the lower bound and upper bound. So lower bound is that look at primes congruent to plus or minus 1 mod n naught, and look at the contribution of such primes in un. So here cyclotomic polynomials are involved. So let me define these cyclotomic polynomials. So basically, LH cyclotomic polynomial is product of alpha minus the ith root, the Lth root times beta, where, yeah, so I'm taking this k to be a number between 1 and L, which is 4 prime to L. So you look at this alpha minus 2 pi I k by L times beta, where k runs from 1 to L, which is 4 prime to L. So this is not exactly the cyclotomic polynomials, but this is the homogenization of this LH cyclotomic polynomial, where it's a single variable. So we homogenize into pair alpha and beta. It's a well-known fact that this number phi, the homogenization phi L, they are always integers, and in fact for L bigger than 4, which are and L not equal to 6 or 12, it turns out that every prime, if you factor this number, this is an integer, if you factor this number, all you have every prime which are congruent to, like in the factorization is composed of primes which are congruent to plus or minus 1 modulo L plus some number which is either 1, 2 or largest prime factor of L. So PL means the largest prime factor of L. So this is the homogenization of the cyclotomic polynomial. So basically so this tells you that if you are considering primes congruent to plus or minus 1 modulo N naught, then you have to bring in somehow the phi L. Now let's recall the primitive divisors I stated before. So primitive divisors are the primes which divides UL but doesn't divide UM for any m less than L and doesn't divide R square plus 4S. And we also know that primitive divisors are plus or minus 1 modulo L. So hence from the above, from the previous slide, we can see that for L bigger than 4L not equal to 6 and 12, the contribution of primes congruent to plus or minus 1 modulo L, which divides UL, has to be bounded by this number, the value of this cyclotomic number divided by the largest prime factor of L. So PL is the largest prime. So basically this part is this number divided by PL. So the contribution of primes which are congruent to plus, so there's a typo here. Contribution of primes which are congruent to plus 1 or minus 1 modulo N, which are coming here, is bounded by this number divided by PL. So then our aim is to, how do you get this? Now we do some kind of nice trick here. So you write UN, we know it's alpha power n minus beta power n by alpha minus beta. So for some n naught dividing n, you're going to write it as alpha power n 1 times beta power n naught by alpha minus beta times alpha 1 minus beta 1 by alpha minus beta. And I call this part, this number alpha 1 power n naught minus beta 1 power n naught by alpha 1 minus beta is u1 n naught. Here I'm choosing alpha 1 such that alpha 1 power n naught is alpha n and beta 1 power n naught is beta n. Yeah, so then our, you should remember that MN naught is the, okay, actually this typo. So if you look at the contribution of primes which are congruent to plus or minus 1 modulo, n naught, which divides UN, would be at least equal to, is bigger than or equal to plus, primes which are congruent to plus or minus 1 modulo n naught, which divides this number which is U1 n naught. And which is by the previous one, so which is actually cyclotomic polynomial divided by the largest prime factor of n naught. So this is our, this is what we're getting. And here again, I'm using some properties of this cyclotomic polynomial. So yeah, so this satisfies that alpha power t, cyclotomic polynomial, you can write it as alpha power LT minus beta power LT times mu t, where t divides L, and where sum of the mu t times L by t is PL, where mu t is the Mobius function, which counts the number of, so if, yeah, so if t is a product of m primes, then mu t is minus 1 power m, and when t is either t is 1, mu 1 is 1, and when t is not square free, then mu t is 0. And phi L is the Euler phi function, which counts the number of positive integers co-prime to L. So by using this and slide here and the last inequality here and some more analysis, we actually prove the main result of which gives the lower bound for MN naught. So given a positive integer n, you take primes p. Okay, so n be positive integer given, and p1 are distinct primes with p less than p1, and t is a non-negative integer, s is a positive integer, h1 are positive integers, and I'm choosing n naught as p power s, or n naught as p power s times p1 power s1, with n naught bigger than 4, n naught not equal, n naught outside, n naught not equal to 6 or 12. So I'm choosing n naught in such a way that n naught times p power t is divides n. So in this case, we have a nice lower bound for mn naught. So we have a bound for mn naught, which is log of alpha power n minus log of n by alpha power pt plus 1 minus beta of n by pt plus 1 minus log of pt plus 1. So we have a bound. Similarly, when this is when n is p power x, and when n is p power x times p1 power x, so this is another bound I have. So this is the lemma, and similarly we have some similar result for Bn. I'm not going to go into it. So our aim is to, you see here alpha n minus beta n is coming, alpha n plus beta n is coming. So how do we measurize it? You see, when alpha and beta are real, okay, so that's it here. So we can easily, by triangle inequality, actually we can easily show that alpha n plus minus beta power L is less than 2 times alpha power L. Log should not be there. So in case of real alpha and beta, it's easy to see that, so that alpha L plus minus beta L by alpha t plus minus beta t is alpha power L minus t by 2. This is easy to see. Actually, it follows by using the triangle inequality alpha L minus beta L is, so it follows, one can see easily this. And from the triangle inequality, alpha L minus, one can see the alpha L minus beta L is alpha L, or alpha L plus beta L is alpha power L. So when n is 2 times L and for a odd divisor T of L, then we also can get similar results. This is for any alpha and beta, not necessarily real number. So when n is even, or alpha and beta are real, life is simpler. But when alpha and beta are complex conjugates, this is not that easy. So can you get a lower bound for alpha power n minus beta power n when alpha and beta are complex conjugate? This is not a simple thing anymore. So here we use this linear in complex logarithms. So there's a notion of something called logarithmic height of an algebraic number of degree d, which is given by this certain thing. So I won't, since I don't have much time, I won't go much into it. By using this complex conjugates, by using linear forms in logarithm, from the result of both here, it follows that when log alpha is bigger than 4 and L bigger than or equal to 3, then log of alpha plus alpha power L plus minus beta power L is bounded below by L minus 44.88 times log square L minus this number. As you can see here, like L minus 44.88 log square L minus 211.08 log L minus 249.08. When L is less than around 5,000, and it's like 5393 in principle, then this number is negative. You actually don't get anything. So in fact, this bound is also, good only when L is bigger than 5393. So, so we use it. So that's one of the results where in case of alpha beta complex conjugates, we have bound around 6,500. And for a general alpha beta, we always have alpha minus beta is UL and alpha plus beta is bigger than BL. Log. So log of this is bigger than log of UL and this. So this we use this information to get a lower bound for this MN naught. And for the upper bound, actually we use completely different approach. We actually bring in prime numbers. So as you know, a product of primes dividing a factorial is less than k minus 1 by p minus 1, which follows from Legendre's formula. So if you take alpha p to be a power of prime which divides this un to the un, then this bound is bounded by m minus 1 by p minus 1. Then by using Legendre, actually mn naught, so to get a bound for mn naught, we need to measurize the right hand side of the last last inequality. So that is when mi is bigger than n naught minus 1, mi minus 1, so on. So I'm going to go a bit faster here. So so basically mn naught becomes just measurizing this part where product of the sum of m minus 1 times sum log p by p minus 1. So then once prime comes, so we need to anyway use prime number theory and analyze. So we use analysis and somehow so that the part here log p by p minus 1, this sum is actually bounded by mi log mi minus 1 and get the result. So basically so we use quite a bit of analysis and other things. So I just want to show you here. We actually use this Abel summation formula. So when we are, so there comes a time when we need to measure this log p by p. Then by using this shift from the shift theory, there's this function that number of primes up to x which are congruent to a modulo n is given by 2x by phi n naught log x by n naught. So we use this bound due to Bomberi, so we use this bound due to this many people, including Halberstam, etc. We use this bound and combine along with this Abel summation formula. So as you can see, the Abel summation formula is actually given by sum of log p by p. You can measurize it by this pi 1x plus pi minus 1x log x by x minus this, and we use the this in the okay. Yeah, so we use the inequality that pi 1 is the primes which are congruent to 1 mod n, and pi minus 1 is primes which are congruent to minus 1 modulo n naught, and we use this pi 1t is less than 2t by p n naught log p by n naught. Pi minus 1t is also similar bound. So we combine them and then get some expression, and after a lot of analysis, we finally get this lemma, which tells you that the product of primes which are composed of the product of prime powers which are composed of primes congruent to plus or minus 1 modulo n naught dividing this product of factors m1 factorial, m2 factorial, mk factorial is bounded by very nice formula. So here log f is, f is product of factorials. So 4 by phi n naught, 1 plus log n naught. And when n naught is small numbers, say 8, 9, 12, 16, 24, or a prime between 5 and 30, you get something nicer. So we use this and we combine this upper bound with the lower bound and get a contradiction and get the result. And similarly for the Catalan numbers, the product of prime plus or minus 1 modulo n naught dividing product of this Catalan or binomial coefficients, you can also get a bound here like this. And then now so for n naught bigger than 25, we have something very nice here. And for n naught less than between less than 25, so we're not taking all the numbers, but we're taking 9, 16, 24, or numbers between 5 and 20, primes between 5 and 23, where the result actually, so this follows from prime number theory. So we use a lot of ideas from prime number theory and lots of analytic arguments, and we get this result. And that's all for now. So I'll be happy to take take any questions if you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shanta. So we have lots of questions from the participants. So now we have selected a few. So I think you can kindly clear these queries.
Yes.
So the first one is, what is can you say something about the largest prime number, and what is the applications of prime numbers? A little bit means highlight
Okay.
about
Yeah.
the.
Well, so okay. So prime numbers, as you know, these are they form an infinite sequence. So there's no largest prime number as such. So right now, in fact, there's a kind of it's a even open problem to check a given number is a prime in a short time. So can you given a number, you're given a number and see what is it the is it a prime or no? It's not that easy, and we even don't know a prime number who's as big as a billion digit. We don't even know a prime number with a billion digit prime number. We even don't know. So there are even prize monies for finding last primes. So, and prime numbers are used in cryptography nowadays. When you use a lot of internet data for data security, use prime numbers. So there's something called RSA algorithm, which relies on that factoring is hard. So there we use a lot of prime number ideas and make the things secure. So that's a completely different approach. But I think I can show you the largest. Okay, this one. Yeah, I just want to show you this slide. So in fact, this number is a 20,562 digit number. Okay.
I think we cannot see.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'll share this. Okay. Let me share this. Okay, share screen. Where is the? Are you not able to see?
Yeah. We can see.
Okay. So I just want to show you this. Okay, so this is the top 10 largest non-primes.
Okay.
So right now, as of today, this 2 power at 2589933 minus 1 with around 24.8 million digits is the largest non-prime. In fact, there's a challenge for people to find last prime. So if you go to this Electronic Frontier Foundation website, which I've written here, so they give prizes for finding last primes. In fact, if you can find a prime with 1 billion digits or 100 million digits, you'll get around 1 crore. So it's like 1 crore per thing. But this is still a problem. Anyway, that's what. But there's a whole lot of area towards this, but I won't go into it now.
Okay, thank you, sir. And now, the one questions: what is the GCD of a Fibonacci number and Lucas number, and for n greater than 1, any specific pattern?
Okay, so I'll tell you about this. So I'll show you this slide. Okay, so this one. Some proper, yes. So you see, Webber formula, Fibonacci is UN, Lucas is VN. So if this is GCD divides 4 times SN. Now a prime which divides N doesn't, the device S doesn't divide Fibonacci or Lucas. So the GCD of Fibonacci, so Fibonacci and Lucas number is either 2 or 1.
Okay, so like here is a questions from Abhijit Mukherjee. So it says, like binary, is there any recurrence relations called tertiary?
Oh, yes. Actually, not only binary is 2. So these are most widely studied, but you can have for ternary and many other things. So instead of 2, you can have 3 terms, 4 terms, 5 terms, any number of terms. So like Fibonacci, you have this Fibonacci. Fibonacci is coming from ternary. That means some of previous 3 terms, then it's Fibonacci. So it's also studied.
Or sir, one last question. The question says, is the GCD of two Fibonacci numbers, always Fibonacci number. Fibonacci number is
Yes, actually, that is true. That's what I have actually I have given you in this strong biblical sequence. GCD of UN is UD.
okay.
So that's the.
Okay,
So
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Shanta Laishram. So we are very grateful, and many participants are asking many things, as well as they are having the lots of thanks and lots of appreciations about both the speakers. So we are very kind and thankful to both the speakers.
So here, as the interruption, I just want to tell you. So if you have any questions or if you want to understand more about it, you just feel free to email me at one of these, either my official shanta@isit.ac or shantalaishram@gmail.com. So
Yes.
please feel free to email me, and I'll be happy to answer your questions if you have any.
I think definitely our participants will send queries and questions further. So to the Shanta Laishrams, or maybe in his contact to me also for the query.
Yeah,
So
sure.
there is no problem. So we will try to solve any kind of queries. And remember, we will try to give the participants, all the participants, e-certificate through their emails, which are the register with the systems. So for that, so we will try to give it within 10 days or 10 working days. So you have to be here for that. And finally, for the closing off, there is another webinar in the 2 o'clock. So they have to open it by 1:30. So let me give you let me give the board of thanks. So I am very thankful to get the privilege to give the board of thanks of these webinars. And in the webinars, we have two the speakers, Dr. Prashant Kumar Srivastava, as well as Dr. Shanta Laishram. We are very thankful to both of you for your interesting and very delightful the presentations, which highlight the importance of the recurrence numbers, as well as recurrence sequence, as well as the mathematical modeling on COVID. So we are thankful to our Honorable Vice Chancellor for giving a room in this crucial time to have these the webinars arranged by the Department of Mathematics and Computer Science, Mizoram University. We are very thankful to our system admin, system analysis, Dr. Suraj Singh, for helping us in the difficult situations where we cannot do. And we are very thankful to all the participants for their the participations and for their questions and queries which put up in the systems, which put up a rise in the presentations. So we are very thankful to all of you. And the last and not the least, so we are extremely happy and delighted to say very successful the webinars, and we are very thankful to the speakers, both the speakers, Prashant Kumar Srivastava as well as Shanta Laishram. Thank you all.